Back at it here on the Kaufman Corner with you as always, the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB with you as we talk Royals baseball, proudly brought to you by our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete, serving Kansas City since 1994. All your parking lot problems, they've been solving them for almost 30 years. Find them online at ganasphalt.com. We dive deep tonight. If you're catching us via the podcast, remember you can catch us live. Usually Sunday nights at 10 is when we go. We dive deep on the World Series teams. What got them here? How are they built? How are they different than the Kansas City Royals? What do the Royals need to be looking at from these two clubs, trying to mimic? How can they make their way to and through the postseason? We break it all down right now here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany and the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by GAN Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at ganasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. GAN Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
And good evening and welcome here to the Kaufman Corner podcast, a deep dive on the World Series. As we broadcast here tonight, the Kansas City Chiefs have just lost, so we know there's a lot of crossover in Royals fans and Chiefs fans. And I don't know that this is going to be the pick-me-up. I don't know that this solves it, Rany. I don't know that the stuff I've been looking at, I don't know that I've got the elixir to make everybody feel better.
Well, there is a silver lining here, which is, I believe the last time the Kansas City Chiefs lost to the Denver Broncos was in 2015.
Oh, look at you.
So
okay.
Quite possibly all that the Royals needed to be competitive again was for the streak to be snapped. So that's what I'm going to hang my hat on, because frankly, I don't have many other silver linings to take away from today's Chiefs.
Did that loss, did you go back and look, did that loss happen before the World Series?
I believe their winning streak began. Here we go. The last time the Chiefs lost to the Broncos was September 17th, 2015. Okay. So it was before the Royals won the World Series. They played again in November, and the Chiefs won, and that began the 16-game streak. So the last time that the Broncos were victorious, the Royals went on to be world champions. I'm not saying that's going to happen the next time the Royals take the field, but hey, anything's possible.
Yeah, anything's possible. What we wanted to look at is what can we take away from these clubs. Obviously, we're not going to look at the number 4 payroll of the Texas Rangers and say, okay, the Royals got to get there. It would be nice. It would be nice to see them get there, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think from a payroll standpoint, if we want to start with that, it's the fact that, look, I really bristle when people say money doesn't matter, right? I get upset when they point to the fact that the, Baltimore Orioles payroll was not one of the highest payrolls in baseball. That, oh, look, the Orioles had the 28th depending upon, and you've pointed this out before, which site you look at, whether it's factors in, before the season started, what they ended up adding to the roster, so on and so forth, what they may have shed and traded along the way. But I really get upset when they say the Orioles and even this Diamondbacks team, right, who had the 21st payroll, according to the site I'm looking at, because they're young teams. They've built the right way. Yes, they're inexpensive because they're entering the, beginning of their window. And so I don't like it when people point to, see, you don't have to spend money. Yes, you can, if done almost perfectly, in building in the organization from within. You can trading. Yes, we've talked a lot about being, active. You can build a roster that way, but to sustain it, To have continued winning, you're going to have to pay players that are in the prime of their career. You're going to have to pay players that are beyond team control with arbitrations. And so the only club that I'll listen to is the Tampa Bay Rays. They're the only ones that keep doing it, keep doing it, and keep doing it. The Diamondbacks are new to this party, and the Rangers bought their way in. Bought their way in so much that I think it's really important. The one thing that jumps to me is their best pitcher didn't pitch. Right? They've got a $40 million arm sitting on the sideline in Jacob deGrom. And so I think with these two teams, you've got a contrast. The Diamondbacks are entering their window, and a lot of things broke right. You know, they're the first team with a negative run differential since the 87 Twins to make their way to the World Series. Obviously, there's a little bit of flukiness to this, but there's flukiness. And I think there's also some things we can look at that are, you know, are to be copied if you get there. Like the Diamondbacks, I think, are one of those teams that's a better postseason team than they are a regular season team. And that's showing at this point. They got a better win percentage in the postseason, right? Like, but, you know, I think the one thing that jumps at me is it is going to be at some point, the Royals are talking about a stadium, and it's starting to go round and round amongst the politicians here in Kansas City about that. At some point, that revenue is going to have to be dumped into payroll, and it's going to have to be dumped into some guys that cost some money. The payroll is the first thing that jumps at me. Yes, it can be done on a smaller budget, but you can have almost no mistakes.
100%. You can, you know, the Royals can learn from the Texas Rangers. They don't have to have, you know, a $200+ million payroll, one of the top five payrolls in the game. But the Rangers, it's not like the Rangers put that into one guy. I mean, let's look at, you know, the money you mentioned, Jacob deGrom, you know, which he got $30 million this year and blew out his arm after 6 starts. But you know what? Those were 6 really good starts, and they made the playoffs by 2 games. So even that money might be, you know, may very well have been money well spent. You know, it's funny when you mentioned their expensive pitcher. For a moment, I thought you were talking about Max Scherzer because they traded for him midseason. Now, I think the Mets are picking up almost all of his salary this year, but I believe there's an option for next year of over $40 million. The Rangers may end up picking that up. They can spend that kind of money, but they also spent.
Wait, can we before you move off that, hold that thought, because the Rangers did some kicking around on Salvador Perez. I'm to understand, and I'm wondering. We know that the Royals will eat money, but would they eat money the way the Mets ate money? Would they?
I sure as hell hope they will.
If they had eaten the whole thing, would Salvador Perez be swinging a bat, have the gear on for the Texas Rangers right now? Was that the difference between getting a deal done and not getting a deal done? I don't know, but I know that there was an interest in Salvador Perez from Texas.
I've heard that. I don't know how much of it was the salary versus the prospects that were in the deal, but if and when the day comes when Salvador Perez gets traded, I hope that's the case. I've made this case before. I'll continue to make it. Every dollar the Royals take on his salary is value that they can extract from the other team in terms of the players that they get.
Right.
And they're already paying Salvador Perez that money. So go ahead and pay him all of it, 90% of it, you know, the huge chunk of it, and make him a more valuable commodity. If you know, until we can get the Royals to actually start spending money on elite free agents from other teams, at least spend the money on your one elite free agent that you signed, but that you're now willing to trade. But to get back to the Rangers where they spent their money, okay, deGrom and Scherzer may or may not be, you know, money well spent, but Marcus Semien is, you know, I think got a 7-year deal, I want to say, and you know, two years into it has been tremendously valuable. He was actually the most valuable position player in the American League this year by Baseball Reference. Obviously, Shohei Ohtani overall was the most valuable player, but as a position player, his combination of elite defense at second base, and you know, 29 home runs and 40 doubles, led the league in hits, made him a hugely valuable player. Why is he playing second base? Well, because they also spent a crap ton of money to sign Corey Seager to be their shortstop. And 2 years into that deal, that looks tremendous. I mean, Corey Seager led the American League in doubles, even though he missed 43 games. Obviously, hit the massive home run in Game 1 of the World Series. You know, those are guys. Those are superstars. And the point I want to make is, like, the Rangers have done this. They've gone out and signed. That's 4 guys. There were 3 guys they signed out as free agents, and 1 guy they traded for, Max Scherzer. But the point is, they spent tons of money on superstars. And the lesson I think the Royals can take is you're not going to sign 4 superstars, but you can go out and you have to be judicious. You have to be careful, but you can afford to spend big money on one player, preferably a position player, preferably somebody in the prime of their career, rather than wasting, rather than trying to settle for the mid-tier market where you might not spend as much money, but you're going to get guys who don't actually move the needle very much.
Can I push back? I actually think that that's the wrong lesson to take from that. I get your point that he pitched 6. Jacob deGrom pitched 6 good games and they only won by 2. But he's what is he age wise now?
30. He's older. He's 35, I believe. Yeah, 35 years old.
I'm trying to find him here on the payroll, but yes, he's way up there age wise, and like who knows if he's ever going to be healthy. That to me is the moral of how the big market clubs do it. Because the other thing is, listen, they were close to, petering out coming down the stretch. We know that they kind of fumbled away the division at the end, but Seager and Simeon are signed through age 37, being paid premium dollars. And I think those 2 guys, I'm with you on signing a guy, but I'm not with the Royals making those signings. Unless I would be on board with those signings if you're going to admit that we're a window team. We're going to have 3 to 5 year windows where we're going to try to win, and then we're going to acknowledge we are going to crash, and we are going to crash hard, and we're going to live with 100+ losses. Like if that's what it's going to be, I'm okay if that's your stated goal. And because I think part of the problem with the A's is the A's never crashed hard enough until this past year, right? Like one of the reasons when I look at it, I go, well, why did the A's? They were good, but they were never great. They could never really go deep in the postseason. And I think the flaw with the A's was not being willing to crash all the way and get several years like the Orioles, where you pick top 5 for like 3, 4, 5 years. I think that's one of the keys to why the Orioles are going to be really good for a while. I think it was one of the keys to the Royals getting back there. They weren't even that fantastic with the draft picks, but they had so many top 5 picks. They got certifiable difference makers that were really cheap. In 2 or 3 years, the Texas Rangers are going to have a payroll disaster on their hands. I mean, let's call it what it is. It's working now. It's the Los Angeles Rams version of whatever it takes. We don't care. We've never won a World Series, and we have to get that off the books. Whatever it takes, whatever it takes after that, we can no longer be a franchise that has never won a World Series. We must get rid of that. And I think they went all in for it. I don't think that's the approach you want to do, certainly don't have to do, having just won in 15 and having been to 4 World Series as a franchise and won 2 of them. I don't think you have that. I think you can build for the longer haul, and I think signing guys where at least the last 3 years are going to be trash is not prudent for this ball club.
We can argue over whether or not the window strategy, as you put it, is actually what will happen. Like if signing a guy to a long-term deal is guarantees that at the end of it it's going to end badly, but even if it does, if there's actually a window, that I'll take my chances with the 3 to 5 year window. And if things are bad at the back end of it, at least I had the 3 to 5 year window, because in the last 38 years we've had one window,
right?
And that was the best, still the best part of being a Royals fan.
It absolutely was. But the problem with it was they didn't realize it was a window, and I think that's the key. Is you have to acknowledge that. I don't know that you have to tell your fan base that, but in the inner circle, you have to say, the time is now.
Right. But you're saying that if you do that, it's the problem wasn't that there was a window. The problem was, like you said, the Royals never acknowledged. Dayton Moore could never acknowledge this is the window and make decisions with that in mind. If he had, the crash may have been harder, but they would have had a better chance to win 16 and 17.
Yeah, and you certainly would have traded Wade Davis for Jorge Soler.
Right. But that's one of the examples. Or rushed Alberto Mondesi to the majors when he wasn't ready, when you had Merrifield ready to go.
Yes.
That, to me, honestly, may have hurt them even more. And at the same time, you would have embraced the crash and actually, reveled in having the top picks, instead of, drafting 7th in a draft where the number 6 pick by the Arizona Diamondbacks was Jordan Lawler, who is not, and has not been a postseason menace, but is they're reinforcements for next year. There's a reason why the Diamondbacks look like they might be competitive for years to come, is because of that farm system. That could have been the Royals, but the Royals, you mentioned the A's like never bottoming out, but at least in the A's case, it was because at least at the start of the Moneyball era, they were so far ahead of every other team in terms of the way they ran their team that they couldn't be bad because they were constantly finding players they knew where the good players were that no one else wanted. And Billy Beane accidentally would win 75 games in a bad year. So it's hard to fault them too much for that. Whereas
No,
the Royals case, they've been bad on accident, but just not bad enough.
And they were in uncharted territory. They were the first club to say we're well, other than the Marlins who just imploded it.
But the Marlins were doing it for financial reasons.
Right. The A's were the first club to say this is a tactical approach to what we're going to take. We're going to shed now for then. And I think there were ways to have shed even more and gotten even higher draft picks and maybe come away with more superstar players to supplement their roster. By the way, we're brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the entire KC area. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews in every project. Coming with a written warranty, Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer, helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays, costly expenses, giving your customers, giving your clients a great first impression and a great last impression as they come and go from your business. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. What else? What's next?
Well, I mean, I want to take a step back and just say one of the lessons to learn from these teams is you don't have to be great. You just have to be mediocre. You just have to be good enough. I've been vocal on Twitter or X, I guess nowadays, over the last couple of weeks about how I do not like the fact that baseball expanded to 12 playoff teams, and I got a lot of pushback from that. But I stand by it that I don't think it's good for baseball because it's not good for the truly great team. There's no incentive for a team like the Dodgers to win 105 games when all anybody cares about is the postseason. And if you have number one seed and you lose in your first playoff series like they did, nobody seems to care. But what might not be good for baseball is very good for the Royals, because in a league where the 84 and 78 Arizona Diamondbacks, you mentioned, they're playing better in the playoffs than they did before. Well, they kind of had to, because they were outscored during the regular season. They are only the second team in Major League history, I believe, to reach the World Series having been outscored during the regular season after the 1987 Twins.
Yeah, as I said earlier.
Right. And, the Rangers won 90 games, which perfectly fine, but I believe this is the lowest combined win totals for two World Series teams in a full season.
Can I go you a step further?
Sure.
And with a negative run differential, you would assume, okay, you figure average is what? Even, right? Like that's where it ought to come out. But they were outscored by the league average by 2 runs, and they gave up over the league average. I think it was 13 more runs than the league average.
So they had slightly below average offense and a slightly below average pitching
yes.
and run prevention. Yeah, I mean, that's my point. Mediocrity is like, you don't have to be great.
Wouldn't you have thought that, like, okay, they were a terrible scoring team, but they were number one pitching, right? Like if there was a negative run differential, you'd be like, okay, yeah, they were negative 27 runs or whatever it ended up being, but it's because they give up the second fewest runs in baseball. No, they were bad in both. Like that even is hard to do.
And that's why when people talk about, this team, maybe they weren't good during the regular season, but they had that special secret sauce that lets them win in the postseason. I don't really buy that, because it's not like you can look at the Diamondbacks and yeah, they weren't that great, but they did this one thing really well. I mean, we talk about the 2014 Royals. Yeah, they didn't, they weren't a great team. I think they only outscored their opponents by 38 runs. They won 89 games because they had the best bullpen in the sport, right? They had the best outfield defense in the sport. And both of those things, the outfield defense, shined in the playoffs, but you can't make your outfield more important in the postseason than the regular season. But your bullpen, you absolutely can, when you can throw them out there for 3 innings every single game, and there's so many days off, etc. The Diamondbacks I didn't see anybody going into the postseason and be like, yeah, I know the Diamondbacks are the 6th seed, but watch out for them. They've got X. No, there was nothing specific. It is a crapshoot. You get to the playoffs, you've got pretty much the same odds as everybody else. And that's why we've mentioned this before, but one of the more interesting quotes that John Sherman has given as Royals owner I believe it was about a year ago. Maybe it was around the time that it might have been at the press conference where Dayton had been fired and he was announcing JJ as the new general manager, talking about how, and I apologize for paraphrasing, but how, Dayton always wanted to build, a great team. And he's like, I want to see what a wild card team looks like. And, you could easily mock that and be like, oh, he's setting his standards low. But actually, I got what he was saying, and I agree with him. Like, you're playing the American League Central. You don't, if you win 84 games, you might win the division, let alone, make the wild card. Just get into the playoffs. So there's one lesson to learn here. It's just get into the playoffs. And then the other thing, of course, is not just that these two teams, it's one of the lowest combined win totals of all time in the World Series. The Arizona Diamondbacks lost 110 games 2 years ago, right? No team in history had ever made the World Series having lost that many games 2 years ago. The second most losses for a team 2 years prior to a World Series appearance are these Texas Rangers at 102. Both of these, 110, 102. The average of that is 106, which is exactly the number of games the Royals lost this year. And, I've said multiple times, we can't even think about the playoffs for at least 3 years. And I probably would stick to that because the problem, which we'll get into, is it's not just the Royals with the losses, but it's the farm system. The Diamondbacks had a reason. They could get back in 2 years. They had a good farm system. The Rangers spent a ton of money. The Royals are probably not going to do either of those things. So maybe 2 years is ambitious, but 3 years certainly, because again, you don't have to go from 106 losses to 95 wins. 85 will do. And I think that's a lesson the Royals need to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. And, but they embraced what they were doing too. Right.
Mhm.
And I'm going to say that. And I think this year the Royals did that. Right. I will give them that. We saw them embrace that they were bad and use that they were bad and not try to prop it up for a few bogus wins that didn't matter for anything. Right. They just went ahead and let it be bad.
And the irony is they actually played better in the second half because they went all in at the deadline and, they turned Aroldis Chapman into Cole Reagans, which was meant for the future. But teams that trade for the long term, make decisions for the long term, sometimes the long term becomes the short term faster than you think. And that's exactly what happened. I think Nelson Velasquez, they actually made moves that helped with, even though that wasn't the purpose. So yes, I agree. That was the biggest cultural change, I think, between Dayton Moore and JJ Picollo. Is this acknowledgement that we got to burn it to the ground a little bit. And we've already seen some dividends there.
Yep. Agreed. All right. You ready to turn the page?
Go for it.
All right. I'll turn the page to the starting pitching, right? The Arizona Diamondbacks had 3 pitchers throw 140 plus innings. All of them had ERAs well under 5.
Mm-hmm.
The Rangers had 5 pitchers throw 140 plus innings. The Royals had 3 throw 140 plus innings, but they were Zach Greinke with a 506, Brady Singer with a 552, and of course, your guy, Jordan Lyles, with 6.28 ERA. I know this sounds obvious that their starting pitching has to get better, and it does. Like it does have to be better. But I want to be clear: the guys who threw, Ryan Nelson for the Diamondbacks, 144 innings with a 531, but Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen had a 329 and 347. And they threw 177 and 210 innings, respectively.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important. And for the Texas Rangers, Dunning, 172 with a 370, 157 for John Gray with a 412. Andrew Heaney, 147 with a 415. He was signed as a free agent on a 1 with a player option year deal. And Nathan Eovaldi, 144 innings with a 363. Martin Perez, 141 with a 445. Listen, that's not I think the second, redo for Dayton Moore, he wanted to romantically recreate Glavine, Maddox, Smoltz. And now Jacob deGrom, as we've pointed out, was in this mix, but none of these teams are Maddox, Glavine, Smoltz, right? Like, I don't know that really exists, and I don't think you need to try to do that.
I don't think teams are trying to do it anymore. You don't see guys going
with Asa Lacy. I think Dayton Moore was.
Well, maybe he was, exactly. But look at so far this year, not one pitcher has thrown more than 7 innings in a start in any postseason game.
Yeah,
which would be the first time in Major League.
But that's different. But they did throw. I think it's important because I'm with you. The Royals, shine the light on how to do it in the postseason. I think they were the first ones to really, and now it's gone even more beyond just pulling a guy at 4 2/3 and all that. But they really were the first ones to say, we've got HDH and we're going to use it, right? But I do think that you can't go that far either in the regular season, right? This to me, especially when I see 5 Texas Rangers over 140 innings, no, you do not have a bunch of 200 inning workhorses anymore, but you still have to get some innings from your starting pitching, and it needs to be quality innings, right? And the Royals didn't get that.
Right. The other thing I would say, though, is I agree with you, and yet I'm going to layer onto that. So, yes, you need innings from your starting pitchers. You don't have to develop it all in-house. Look at those
Yes.
guys. The
Eovaldi
Diamondbacks.
and Heaney. My 2 guys, remember when we did our free agency and when we took from the second and third bucket, we said, listen, bucket 1, we're not going to buy from. And we each had a guy. And by the way, your guy, Michael Conforto, had a fantastic year. I can't remember who your other one was, but Conforto would have been a great get for the Royals. But my 2 guys, do you remember who they were? Eovaldi and Heaney.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I get, Eovaldi was, probably too expensive. Haney, I think what did he get? Like 2 and 24? I'm going to look this up real quick.
He got a 1-year, $12 million deal.
He has a player option for
$13 million, and it's totally on his. But who knows if he'll take it?
Right.
And then Eovaldi was 2 for 34 with a $20 million option that vests if he throws 300 innings.
And again, the Eovaldi maybe would have been, the Royals, that's too pricey for their blood. I think Andrew Haney, absolutely, that's something they could do. They signed Jordan Lyles.
But can we stop? Well, Jordan Lyles was still less significant.
Yes, but we talk about what the end results.
Okay. I'm with you. Both of those guys absolutely could be signed when they're ready to win. I don't know that those 2 guys. This was, first of all, they wouldn't have signed anywhere near.
Fine.
I
agree. Like right now, maybe you don't. But here's my point: it's not just about free agent signings. Like you mentioned, 3 guys on the Diamondbacks for 140 innings, 5 guys on the Rangers. Of the 3 on the Diamondbacks, only 1 came from in-house. That was the
one in-house.
Yeah, Ryan Nelson. Right. He's the only one they developed internally. The Rangers, of their 5, the only one who was developed by them was Martin Perez. And Martin Perez actually he left the Rangers. He's 32 years old. He pitched for them a long time, signed elsewhere, came back. He was kind of like a Greinke, where it's not like he has been in the system from the beginning until now, where he's in the World Series. Everyone else was brought in. Some of them were signings, like you said, Haney, Eovaldi, John Gray. I mean, the Rangers spent a ton of money, but like Dane Dunning was a trade. Zach Gallen was a trade. And the guy I really want to highlight here, because this is the sort of creativity we don't see the Royals do, and they're the kind of organization that needs to do it. Merrill Kelly. Do you know how the Diamondbacks got Merrill Kelly? Merrill Kelly was a fringe pitcher in the major leagues. In the minor leagues. He never actually made it to the major leagues until 2014. Went to pitch in Korea for 3 seasons. It had, 4 seasons. And I mean, good numbers, but not great. Especially, I mean, Korea, is actually probably a little step below Japan in terms of quality. And Japan's obviously lower quality in the major leagues. And his ERAs those 4 years, just to give you an example, 413, 368, 364.09. Those are not great numbers. However, one thing to keep in mind, Korea, very high offense league compared to like Japan. So those ERAs don't sound at all impressive, but he had strikeout to walk ratios of like 3-1, 4-1. But still, nobody was expecting him to be like a superstar, even a quality guy in the major leagues. When he came back, the Diamondbacks signed him, I think it was I want to say he just got a 2 or 3 year guarantee. It was like $5 million for 2 years. And from day one, he was a completely different pitcher. He learned how to pitch overseas, came to the majors, debuted at age 30. And in his first year, he gave him 180 innings of a 4.42 ERA. Then the pandemic year, pitched very well in 5 starts. And he's slowly gotten better. In the last 2 years, he's had ERAs of 3.37 and 3.29, averaged 185 innings a year. I mean, he's a durable, competent number 2 starter, making, in his entire career this year, he's up to, what's he making this year? $8.5 million. That number might ring a bell. $8.5 million. And he's got on contract for $8.5 million for next year, and then a $7 million team option for 2025.
Well,
really good value for the guy. And again, it's like the Royals. I get it that maybe they're not going to be up there when Yu Darvish comes over from Japan. Maybe they're not going to get the top Japanese pitcher, but there are guys who go over to Japan or Korea all the time. Miles Nicholas in St. Louis. Miles Nicholas Same story. Made it to the majors briefly, went over to Japan, pitched really well for 3 years, but nobody was certain he could make it in the major leagues. Cardinals signed him. He's been a really good pitcher for them for several years now at bargain, basement rates. The Royals need to start being more transactional, not just in terms of trades, but in terms of looking for talent in unusual, for at least for their standards, unusual places.
Yeah, I'll even add on to that when you mentioned the guys that came in-house. Ryan Nelson was a second-round pick, 56th overall.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Brandon Pfaadt was a 5th-round pick.
Yep. And he was a top 20 prospect, 25 prospect before the season in the 5th round.
Yeah, as we talked about earlier, because we kind of touched on this a couple of podcasts ago, but there are only 4 first-round picks that are their first-round picks that are on this team. And of the picks that they traded, we dug a little bit deeper on this. Of the picks that they traded away, former draft picks of theirs that they traded away, they didn't trade away 1 first-round pick. They traded away a couple more second-round picks, right? But the idea that, it's just the first round, not for the Diamondbacks. Only 4 of their first-round picks are on the roster, and they didn't use any of them to trade for anyone else. That a lot of them busted out, but they've got a 6th-round pick and a 22nd, 5th, 6th, 2nd, and then moved seconds, 8th. They found talent in all rounds, either to supplement the roster or to be used in deals.
Right. And you mentioned, Brandon Pfaadt is a great example of where teams are finding so many of their starting pitchers now, which is college pitchers taken in that like 4th, 5th, 6th round range. They're taking these pitchability guys, bringing them in, putting them in a pitching lab, developing velocity, making their pitches better. But these guys in many cases, like good command, and they're turning them in from pitchers into throwers, which is sort of the opposite of what teams want to do. They're like, we'll take a thrower and turn him into a pitcher. We'll take a guy who throws 99 and teach him command. Actually, maybe the solution is take a guy with command who throws 90, teach him to throw 94 with command, and suddenly you have yourself an elite starter. And Pfaadt, he came up, he was a top prospect, came up and was not good during the year because he whipped a lot of home runs. But even during the regular season, very good strikeout to walk ratio. And he has been one of the keys to the Diamondbacks' success in the playoffs. He has been very good in the postseason as their number 3 starter. There's, you don't have to develop guys in-house, but when you do, you certainly don't have to use a first-round draft pick on a pitcher. And the Royals have done that way too often over the years with basically no success since Zach Greinke 20 years ago.
Why risk accidents and liability in your parking lot? Speaking of success, you can be successful with your business if you get your parking lot restriped today. Brightly striped lots cut down on accidents and keep your parking lot safe. That's what Gann Asphalt and Concrete does. One contractor, all things parking lot. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lots. Where do you want to go next?
Well, one thing I thought would be, worth mentioning was talking about the managers in this. The Rangers side, I don't know if there's much of a lesson there other than if you get the opportunity to hire a guy who's won 3 World Series, go ahead and hire him. Bruce Bochy's, he's going to the Hall of Fame. He was going to the Hall of Fame before he decided to come out of retirement. They might as well just put him in while he's still active. But on the other side, I just think it's interesting. Torey Lovullo lost 110 games 2 years ago. And it wasn't like his first year as a manager. It was actually his 5th year with the Diamondbacks. Now, granted, his first year, he won 93 games. He'd been over 500 his first 3 years. But that a lot of organizations, a disaster season like that, you have to make a move for making a move's sake, and they would have let him go. I'll give, Mike Hazen, the Diamondbacks general manager, credit that he recognized this was not the manager's fault. I think he said something to the quote where, when you lose 110 games, that's a talent problem. That's a me problem, referring to me as the general manager, not the manager problem. And kept him around. And he is a good manager, and he has, done, I think, a very good job in the playoffs here. I think there is a lesson there that bodes well for the Royals with Matt Quatraro. Just I've mentioned the Orioles with Brandon Hyde. Now he lost 115 games just a couple years ago, and they stuck with him. And now the Orioles are a 100-win juggernaut. There used to be a time where a manager simply could not survive losing 100, 105, 110 games. I think teams, just as they're savvier in other ways, I think they're savvy enough to realize sometimes it's not the manager's fault. Even a disaster season is not the manager's fault. And, maybe you can put some of the blame on this season for the Royals on Matt Quintero, but I honestly struggle to see how it was his fault. And the one thing that you would worry about with a manager, especially a rookie manager who's kind of a low stress guy, is if he loses the clubhouse, if the players start losing respect for him, if they stop listening to him. And if that happened, that sure didn't show up in the standings, because the fact that the Royals, they could have easily packed it in after the horrible start, and the fact that they almost played 500 for the last 2 months of the season, I think that really that reflects well on Quintero, and I think that he deserves an opportunity to prove that he could be like a Lavello, like a Brandon Hyde, where one terrible season does not only doesn't define him, but actually is still a springboard to success in the future.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do wonder, he's so easygoing and so low key. What will happen if he needs to go to the whip? Can he go to the whip if he needs to do it? I mean, but Bruce Bochy, if anyone's ever been around him in person, there is a presence to the man. He is a large man, not just a giant head, a large man, a booming voice. He's a sweetheart of a guy, but there is a presence to him when he is there. You sense him, and when Lavello is bombastic at times. If you saw him in the clubhouse celebrating the World Series, you can see where he can light some things up. And maybe there is that side of Matt Quintero, and we just haven't seen it out there. I'll give you one that's got to happen. They got to hit more home runs, right? And this goes without saying. And some of that's just we'll get better players. I mean, both these teams had 4 players over 20 home runs. The Royals had 2.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to find off the playoff average. They're 50 home runs off. They have to find 50 home runs to become an average playoff team. And where that power is going to come from, I don't know. Part of it, I do know where part of it will come from. They played without their best power hitter this year because of injuries. That was a giant problem for this team. And they will get him back, and that'll be certainly a good thing. But they've got to find more power, more players with power, not just one guy.
I mean, I will always agree the Royals need to add more talent, but I'll push back on this a little bit by just saying the Royals hit 163 home runs this year. Do you know how many home runs the Diamondbacks hit? 166.
And I don't think the Diamondbacks are the blueprint on how to do it.
I was going to say the lesson there isn't so much home run. It's one more example of how the Diamondbacks were not a very good team during the season, but they were just good enough. The bigger, I mean, if you want to talk about offensively, though, the big difference, the Royals drew 411 walks, next to last in the American League.
Oh, for sure.
The Diamondbacks drew 500.
Next to my list is the on base,
yeah.
And power goes guys who can hit the ball over the wall. Pitchers fear and they walk more,
right.
And guys who don't swing at bad pitches make better contact and drive the ball over the wall. They go hand in hand.
And what's so maddening to me is that what you're saying is absolutely true. I mean, there's definitely a correlation between having power and being able to draw walks, because you will see fewer strikes. And for so long, I wondered if, maybe the ballpark, maybe Kauffman Stadium was part of the problem with the Royals not drawing walks, because by the ballpark limits home runs. And if it limits home runs, limits the Royals' power, limits their ability to strike fear into opposing pitchers, maybe that's part of the reason why they don't draw a lot of walks. And what's so frustrating is this year, I mean, they had one of their best power years as a franchise they've ever had. They're hitting for power. I mean, Bobby Witt hit 30 home runs. Salvador Perez hits for power, but Salvador Perez never draws a walk. And
that's why I wanted to stress it. We look around and go, the power is pretty good, and it's not. It's pretty good relative to what this organization usually pumps out there, because they have not put a priority on the skill that is hitting the ball far. They put a priority on guys winning a combine, a baseball combine, on having tools and not skills. And I think that's changing for the people I've talked to. But that's one of the reasons why I picked it, is oh no, they have more power now. They don't have enough.
I mean, we both agree they need more power. They need more play discipline. I just wonder if maybe we're mixing up the chicken and the egg argument here, where the problem is the reason why they're not drawing walks isn't because they don't hit for enough home runs. I think the reason they need the reason they don't hit for enough power, and the way for them to hit for more power is to be more disciplined at the plate, to take more pitches. Not only will they draw more walks, they will get ahead in counts 2-0 and 3-1 more. They'll have more hittable pitches.
Well,
I think those things feed upon each other.
I think they do feed upon each other. I don't think it's a chicken or egg. I think they go hand in hand. And I don't think you need to figure out which one to go with first. I think you need to start teaching guys to lift the ball. And you're about ready to build a new ballpark. And if we're going to, if I'm so tired of listening to how the ballpark plays this way or that way, you're building a new one, then change it. Change it to what allows you. I do not want to go into a ballpark and hear the reason the Royals suck year after year after year is because the ballpark gets in people's head. Well, and he's trying to hit home runs, and it's a big ballpark. I don't ever want to hear about the ballpark again. You've got to fix whatever that problem is. If that's what it is, and you think you've got plenty of power and plenty on base, but the ballpark has got some voodoo hex on everybody, then you're going to build a new one. Change it.
I know. I agree. I do not want to hear that as an excuse. And if that means just building a ballpark with generic average dimensions, if that just takes that off the table, I agree. I think the Royals have used every excuse they can to ignore the elephant in the room, which is that, look, there have been years they've hit for power, especially when they moved the fences in from like 1996 to about 2004. There are years they hit for power. There are certainly years they hit for average. There's years they steal bases. There has never been a year where they drew more walks than average.
Yeah.
Make plate discipline. Let's try that between now and whenever we get a new ballpark. Let's see what happens if we start taking more pitches. Let's see if the power comes with that. If not, then maybe we need to have a discussion about the new ballpark.
Because that was my next one. You knocked out my next one.
What was your next one?
It was on base. Was walks.
On base.
Right.
Okay. Yes. So they go to hand in hand. I think we agree with that. And it's just a matter
the
of
Royals did steal basically the same number of bases as the Diamondbacks, which would serve them well if they got to the postseason. It's why if the Diamondbacks don't make the playoffs the next 3 years, even after winning the World Series, it's not going to be shocking because they're not a very good regular season team the way they're built.
Right. Well,
they're to get in there. And
now
they're
that they've got talent coming, like their farm system.
Yes.
I mean, Jordan Lawler wasn't there. Drew Jones, although he didn't have a great year, was one of the top prospects coming into the season. And then obviously Corbin Carroll is probably just going to get better and better. So they're a good team, but yes, they're not a great team, but they were good enough. And then you just roll the dice in the postseason. So I have one more thing that I think is worth mentioning, which is that both of these teams have really good defenses, especially in certain parts. But their overall defense, I want to say the Rangers by defensive runs saved were, I may have mixed up the numbers. One of them is fourth, the other one's like sixth. They're both top 10 defensive teams in the major leagues. I mean, you look at the Diamondbacks with their outfield. I mean, this is the 2015-2014 Royals model. They have essentially, two center fielders out there in Corbin Carroll and Alec Thomas. Lord Gurriel is turned into a decent left fielder. And then the Rangers, by signing Sager, they're able to move Semien, who's played shortstop and second base, and make him purely a second baseman, upgraded the defense, at both positions. These are good defensive teams. And that's something, defense, I think, is still not priced appropriately and valued appropriately. And I think the Royals are making moves in this direction. It's one of the reasons why, as much as I've talked about trading Maikel Garcia, if a team out there wants him as a shortstop, I'm more and more inclined to just, leave him be, let the Royals have a great defensive left side of the infield and hope that he starts elevating the ball, because you can't, a great defense is a great defense. Like it's a valuable thing to have no matter what else is going on with the rest of the team.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, and I guarantee you, you can just watch these teams. You don't see catchers out there with frying pans playing in the outfield. I mean,
no MJ Melendez out there. Yep, that I go with that.
I mean, the teams fit, right? Outfielders play outfield. You just mentioned it. Infielders play the infield. Like they fit.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. The Rangers, I mean, Evan Carter came up and was, obviously he's been this huge offensive boost. He's also been a good defensive player. Adolis Garcia, you think of him as this power hitting RBI dude. And, at least me personally, like my mental image of a guy like that is, okay, he's kind of an oaf in the outfield. No, Adolis Garcia is a good defensive right fielder. Like, defense matters. And the Royals are still paying for the sins of the Dayton Moore era by having Melendez and Edward Olivares traipsing around the outfield. But if they want to be serious about being competitive, they've got good. It's easier to improve by removing a detriment to your defense than to add a good defensive player. Just replacing bad defensive players is such an easy way to upgrade. And that's something I think the Royals need to seriously consider between now and next season, not having, two bad defensive corner outfielders out there. Because Kyle Isbell is a legitimately really good defensive center fielder. But if you surround him by not one, but two frying pans in the outfield, it's not going to matter.
Yeah, no, and I think the other thing, these teams got off to good starts. And the Royals just routinely, largely because they don't have enough talent, but they come out with good starts and have a reason to play good baseball, right? They're not just playing out the string starting in May. I mean, and that's something that the Royals have to get better at. And that's something that and again, it goes with talent. You win some baseball games. That's a big part of the equation. The Padres, I think, are a great example. They got off to a bad start, and even though they had a positive run differential, they never could quite get over that. They seem to be just finding themselves in September to try to start putting some things together. But I think, get a bullpen that can nail down when you get leads, get a team that can catch the baseball and get off to a good start. Stop trying to put square pegs in round holes, get off to a good start. And I think this gain some confidence, and this club has a much better chance.
Yeah. And then, and if you get off to a good start, but it's not just that, but if you have a bad month, don't let it snowball. Because the Diamondbacks got off to a good start. They had an 8-16 July. And it looked like things were falling apart, and they managed to stabilize things. The problem is the 1 year the Royals did get off to a good start.
But they never had to look and be like, oh, we're already 14 games out, or oh my God, we're 9 games below 500.
Sure.
It's going to be a month before we get above. When they were 8 games below, they'd banked enough wins that you could still look at it and go, over the long haul, we're still a good team, guys.
But also, if you get off to a bad start in April, don't compound that in May and June. And that seems
I
to be
agree.
what the Royals do all the time, too.
Well, and this goes back to something, and, Karen Konecki asked the question about, like, hey, you guys are trumpeting a strong September. We hear that all the time. And I said, like, are you reviewing what you did in spring training and what you did in the offseason to try to get off to a better start? Right? Like, I don't think this was a playoff team, but I don't think it had to be a 106 loss team this past year. And if they, is there something wrong in what they're doing in the offseason? Are they sending guys to the wrong places? Are they signing guys with agents who have crap? All the guys go back to their agents' workout facilities and their home workout facilities. That's a reality of the game. Teams used to fight that. They now know they can't. They've got to coordinate with them and work, but they either need to get better talent, first and foremost, but they've got to review whether or not they need to coordinate better with the workouts that their players are having in the offseason. And they made a good point. They said, listen, we think the World Baseball Classic really hurt Brady Singer, and it was kind of a wonky spring training, but it was for everybody else too. Right.
And I think part of it also is figure out who your 26 best players are in spring training and bring them with you to Kansas City, because one of the things that's always frustrated me is the Royals always end up with 2 or 3 guys on the opening day roster that you're just like, why are these guys here? And by the time you realize that Jackie Bradley's hitting 140, it's May 15th, and you're 20 games under 500. Yeah. Like, figure out who the guys are who absolutely do not deserve to be on a major league roster, and don't bring them with you on opening day.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. We got a big show we're planning on having Daniel Mack next week. He is the head of analytics, like vice president of analytics. Title similar to that. Daniel Mack, a guy I had on the show last summer, took part in a great analytics conference that I was at. He's a very intelligent guy, and he's the guy behind the numbers in the Royals organization. Very much looking forward to talking to him. And so he will be a part of the Kaufman Corner next week. Randy, are you giddy?
I'm excited. I'm excited to compare notes.
I am too. I'm very excited. Always excited to talk Royals baseball here on Kaufman Corner. We're always brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Gann Asphalt and Concrete can keep your parking lot safer, make it look better, make a great first impression with your business, with your clients, with your customers. Every project comes with a written warranty with Gann Asphalt and Concrete. They've been solving Kansas City's parking lot problems for 30 years, since 1994. Why would you go anywhere else? Call Gann at 816-484-3338. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. So for the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much.